Alright, hello, Language 7.0, a project in philosophic language, Pierre Oakland speaking. Right, Language 7.0, it's a language art project. Why? Some of the problems with language, natural language, English specifically. Alright, it's biased against skepticism. What? It's not cool. Anti-skeptic bigots of language. Okay, it's difficult to state what? Relativistic truths? I want to be able to state relativistic truths easily, not difficultly. Okay, there's too much value judgments in words. Okay, the idea is going to be, ooh, I'm getting ahead of myself, never mind. But there's too much value judgments in words. I'm just stating these. We'll get into the why and justification. So the point is just to explain the project. Another thing, motivation, words are not technically well ordered. You know what I mean? Like you look in a dictionary, there's, 4 or 5 definitions, all different senses. There's homonyms, strange relationships. And in between homonyms, poets and people can use the fact that the word is the same word, even though it has totally different senses. And this isn't well ordered, so in the sense that people don't really understand. They're getting hit by a whole web of meanings when a word is used. And I just want to point out, no natural language seems to be free of these kinds of problems. And it's all different kinds of features in various natural languages, but I don't think any of them really don't suffer this problem, this list of problems. All right, some of the solutions. All right. Language is biased against skepticism. Well, we just need some relativistic skeptical redefinitions. Right? Now, here's, for example, think about this. If you want to say, I saw a blue car drive by, and you're a skeptic, you've got to say, I saw what seemed to be a blue car drive by, or even I seem to have seen a blue car drive by. So that's a pain. You don't have to do that. If you want to say, I know a blue car drove by, oh, that's even more difficult. It's like, I know it appears to me that the side of the car that I saw, which, given the fact that the car went by, was more than 180-degree angle around the car, was blue. And as I had had an experience hours earlier of waking, and I didn't have a subsequent experience of awaking again. I think I was awake at the time and conscious as I had been for hours. That's real pain. So you just need to redefine things in terms so they're relativistic and skeptically friendly. And this isn't going to rob anybody else of their ability to the definitions. We can qualify the definitions with the word relativistic knowledge or whatever. But anyway, skeptical definitions allow you to speak other philosophies because they go with some of these other things. Okay, it's difficult to state relativistic truths. Okay, that's true. Now there is too much value judgment in words, so we're going to reframe the terms in neutral material definitions. Okay, I'll give you an example of what I mean. This is going to be about framing, right? Okay, the other point was words are not technically well ordered. Well, we're going to discriminate clearly between the senses of words. Okay, and also especially to identify the extension and intention. To a degree, we think there's a bunch of senses of words. Each sense has its own extension and intention, or rather sets of, because there will generally be sort of an idea of the extension with a few variations, and then a bunch of candidate intentions depending on how well understood the set of the extension is thought to be. Since no language is free of these problems, we want to evolve a philosophical language towards a future ideal that can be free of them. And the goal is not to replace natural language, but it's to create a technical philosophical language, right, so that it would be efficient. Okay, some detailed examples of this stuff for the relativistic skeptical definitions. Relative knowledge, relative certainty. Traditionally, in classical epistemologies, relative certainty is an oxymoron. You can't have relative certainty. It's either certain or it's not, pregnant or not. But in practice, people do talk about, well, I'm relatively certain. Are you certain? Well, I'm relatively certain. And people talk that way about pregnancy too. Now you could say, well, officially they're incorrect. But you can also define things relatively. Okay. And with certainty, you have sort of an option. You could just get rid of that word, but I think it's useful. But with knowledge, there's really no way to get rid of that word. You don't want to get rid of that word. You need to use that word, but you need to understand it as relative knowledge. Every cognitive term really needs this kind of treatment. Okay, now an example of framing things in neutral terms is the term parasite. Now, parasite is a disgusting thing. It immediately brings to people a very negative frame. All right, it is. I'm not suggesting you'll for sure want to do this, but in a language 7.0 type approach, you'll take parasite. You take parasite down to its material meaning. So a parasite is a biological system. It has a host. It lives off the host in a certain way. It is perhaps relatable, but also distinct from predation and from living off raw chemicals and things like this. Now, it's going to be that in a sentence, you're going to say something like, parasites are disgusting, right? But it shouldn't be in the word parasite. The word parasite should just have to do with living in a particular style, which will help you discriminate between parasitic and symbiotic relationships, which is important. Like PETA doesn't really understand when they say pets are slaves. The owners are slaves if they're decent owners at all. Maybe you shouldn't call them owners, but whatever, if they're the slaves. So parasite, is still going to get a big bad rap. We're not going to lose our negative association. We're not going to be forgiving the parasites, thinking that they're good for us, just because the word doesn't take that connotation. And that allows us to talk about, maybe certain things that otherwise would seem like paradoxes. Like parasites that are good. One of the natural ways, an organic way to deal with crop parasites is to spread the parasites of those parasites. Is that good or bad? Well, that's why that starts to be relative to what you're talking about. So a term like parasite has a biological, or almost medical, if you want to call it, a meaning where we should be able to talk about it. Know that it can be negative, know that make you be disgusted in some sense, but really there can be a technical sense. I know that's a difficult example, but it sort of gets the whole idea in one example. So I know it's difficult for people because they're so invested in putting values in a word, especially a word like parasite. It's an example that's chock full loaded with frame, non-neutral frame. Okay. Now, since we want to discriminate clearly between the senses, between senses of a word, this is that idea ITO. This is a way of talking about thinking that helps us break down terms, so we can understand when there's multiple inputs that seem the same because the thinking is the same, and that's the idea of breaking down senses. It's very related. But also is extensional analysis. Now, an extensional analysis is where you take the extension and intension as a separate things very consciously. If you take a word like knowledge, the extension is all the things that are examples of knowledge. Floyd knows how to fix a car. Samantha knows how to play violin. Okay, those are all in the extension of knowledge. Okay, an extensional analysis is where we recognize that we start with that extension, then we're trying to get some sort of a rule, like an algorithm, like writing a program designed to pick from the world exactly the things in that extension. So a description where we could describe knowledge all at once, instead of listing a list of every million things that are knowledge, we could just make a couple sentences so that if you saw something, you could check the sentences and would tell you if that thing was knowledge, right? So the intentional definition of knowledge is something like, absolute certainty of something by luck or otherwise, classically. But that does not pick out the extension. The extension has all kinds of things in it, and nothing's absolutely certain, and that can easily be demonstrated. So an extensional analysis of knowledge leads us to some sort of more flexible definition of knowledge. For example, that knowledge is a category of belief, right? So that you can promote something to knowledge, or that knowledge is made of material facts or adheres to some other criteria. And suddenly, working on language, you understand why people change definitions. It's because the definition is the intention. The traditional definition is the intention, and it's constantly trying to map the you know it when you see it de facto experiential definition of the extension, where the extension is generated by built-in pattern recognition, conditions as well, but a very built-in pattern recognition system in the human mind. For that matter, probably all minds could be talked of in terms of their pattern recognition. And this is how extensions build up. The forebrain seems to be the thing that's really good on making these intentional definitions in the first place. Just an animal, any not particularly intelligent animal, does the pattern recognition, has an extensional definition. It's never a problem because it doesn't have the forebrain that's going to want to list the whole extension anyway. It just has it built into the pattern memory. We, wanting to talk and be analytic about these things, we have these other intentional dictionary definitions of things besides the when you see it group. For millions of years, if you saw an animal of some sort in your area that you're familiar with, a coyote, a rabbit, then you recognized it as belonging to this extension, but you couldn't really speak about a description that was in a pattern language. You didn't have a pattern language. You had a pattern circuitry, but the pattern language is descriptive of that, and you didn't have that. But we do. So our building of language is a play between this extensional analysis, which has all sorts of inputs, both the analytic ability of the mind mixed with all the emotional and biased tendencies of the mind. That generates the extension. Then you generate an intention. You can use that intention to cull things that shouldn't be in the extension. When you get an intention you really like, you cull that extension. And remember, you can have as many extensional senses as you want, right? So you have multiple extensions for a word with multiple candidate and actual intentional definitions, attempting to pick those out. There's sort of an idea that it'll never be perfect. You won't have an intention perfectly pick out an extension until you invent a technical term. And that's what a technical term is. A technical term is a term in which the extension is made to absolutely conform to some particular intention, perfect or otherwise. In mathematics and things, these are done, whether it's pretty or not, because of the way the system works as a result. That's why we have in logic the conditional we have, the material conditional. Okay, language 5.0 through language 1.0. The idea is that I have some rough plans for how the language goes. And it starts at 7.0 and then it counts down. because then there's a plan, not of time, but of some sort of duration, some sort of idea of sequence, where it gets better and better. Language 1.0, theoretically, would be a language that incorporates technical terms from all sorts of languages around the world, adopts grammar from all around the world, so that it's an international technical language, taking the best technical contributions from as many languages as possible. I'm an English speaker. Maybe I should just be promoting English as the technical language of the future. But personally, Esperanto doesn't do it for me, and I could see just inventing a language out. Now, since Language 7.0 is English related because I'm doing it, there is already an English bias in there. But at the very least, we keep incorporating terms from around the world in history and so on. All right, now I want to say that I'm not trying to get rid of the messy words and stuff. I think messy languages are good for poets and expressiveness. Creoles, pidgin languages, so-called, they're good. They can be very efficient and very emotive, with small vocabularies, with a lot of reusable words. And there's an interactive ability for people that are actually interacting face to face, non-written, right? So a messy language is very good spoken in artistic context, and poets learn how to use the weirdness of a term to create a really powerful effect in combination with other such terms. So I don't want to get rid of that. Like I said, we're not trying to replace regular language, natural language. I also think multiple languages, thousands of languages in the world or whatever, is good for cultures. I just think that there's also should be good common languages. I like, even in natural language, the idea that we'd have a global language, but I would want all the multiple languages to exist too. But the existence of a universal technical language, in addition, is very important. Those multiple languages can't feel threatened by the availability of something that would be efficient and designed and to be good for philosophy, science, and engineering. Whoa, darkness.